The young swordsman finishes securing the area, counting nearly 30 guards neutralized in what proved to be an unexpectedly simple task. With the immediate threat handled, he turns his attention to a heavy wooden door at the end of the corridor and pushes it open. As he steps into the room, the sight before him is both tragic and overwhelming. A group of young children, huddled together in the shadows, their eyes reflecting a deep-seated fear. They are 5 young girls, including Arcana with her long braids and Mia with her pointed ears, all dressed in nothing but thin, tattered slips. They cling to one another, trembling as they look up at the stranger who has just burst into their prison. He gazes down at them, his mind racing with the weight of their plight. Though he assures them they are safe, he knows that simply setting them free isn't enough. Without protection, they are destined to be recaptured by the very monsters he just defeated. His hand tightens around the hilt of his blade as a heavy question weighs on his soul. For whose sake does he truly carry this steel? With a soft wave and a warm, disarming smile, he tries to bridge the gap of fear, promising them that he isn't like the men who held them captive. In that moment, he accepts a new burden, realizing that he is the only one capable of giving these children a future. The girls watch him intently, their initial terror slowly giving way to a cautious curiosity as they sense the genuine kindness in his voice and posture. Taking them under his wing, he moves the group to a secluded house in the countryside. He quickly takes on a role of a provider, even enduring the girls' playful judgment as he attempts to pick out suitable new clothes for them. Their new life together quickly falls into a rhythmic harmony. He spends his days preparing hearty meals for his new family, while the girls eagerly pitch in with the chores, their spirits beginning to heal in the warmth of their new home. He understands the need for them to be strong, moving beyond simple domestic duties to begin their training. Under the bright morning sun, he guides Arcana, Elsa, and Nina through the basics of swordsmanship, ensuring they will never be helpless again. He gently pats Elsa's head, a small gesture of affection that brings a bright smile to her face. 5 years pass in the blink of an eye, and the quiet life they shared erupts into chaos as the girls, now grown, playfully tackle him to the ground. He can barely contain his surprise as they pile on, their laughter filling the room. The time for their departure finally arrives, and they stand before him to express their deep gratitude for the path he showed them. He looks at his sword, reflecting on the lessons of purpose and heart he instilled in them, knowing they will carry his teachings into the world. With final waves and promises to take care, the group sets off on their own journey. He watches them go, a bittersweet smile on his face as he waves goodbye to the family he raised. The bright memory fades into the harsh reality of the present. He stirs from his sleep, the voices of the past still echoing in his mind as the sun beats down on his resting place. His peaceful slumber is violently interrupted by a massive, roaring beast. A voice screams for him to wake up as the creature looms over him, its claws ready to strike. Instead of panic, he simply lets out a weary sigh. The threat of the monster seems more like an annoyance than a danger to the seasoned adventurer. Before the beast can reach him, a young girl named Ruin leaps into the fray to defend him. He watches her movements critically, noting that she held back her strength, and reminds her that he didn't train her to struggle against a magical beast of this level. With a decisive strike, she brings the monster down and ends the threat. She immediately turns to him, bowing deeply and apologizing for her perceived failure in protecting him, her face flushed with concern. Seeing her distress, he reassures her and takes the blame for falling asleep in such a dangerous spot. As the wandering adventurer prepares to move on, he glances at his sword, the lingering dream of the girls he once raised still heavy in his heart. The swordsman gently pats Ruin's head, praising her for her hard work and dedication. She looks up at him with wide, excited eyes, clearly thrilled by his rare approval and the warmth of his hand. He reflects on the strange path his life has taken over the last 15 years, ever since he unexpectedly became a father figure to 5 girls rescued from slave trader. A decade has passed since they set out on their own journeys, and now he finds himself in this quiet, rural village, passing on his skills to a new student while wondering if his own edge has dulled in the peace. He tells her that she has reached a level where she can protect the village even without his guidance, suggesting that their time together is drawing to a close. Ruin, however, is not ready to stop, insisting that she's still not good enough and begging to continue their training sessions. He watches as her expression turns somber, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she voices the fear that has been weighing on her. She asks him directly if his words mean he is planning to leave the village soon, unable to hide her distress at the thought of his departure. She listens as he acknowledges her growth, noting that her recent success in hunting magical beasts proves she is more than capable of handling herself. He places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, confirming that she has indeed become strong enough to stand on her own. He explains his own need to move on, feeling that his body has grown dull from the relaxed village life and wanting to retrain himself from scratch. Suddenly, the girl lunges at him with a shout, her sword drawn in a desperate, impulsive attempt to force him to stay. He is taken aback when she challenges him to take her seriously, declaring that if she can defeat him, he won't be able to leave. Seeing the fire in her eyes, he sighs and draws his own blade, deciding to give her one final, serious lesson as she requested. She pours all her frustration and determination into her strikes, shouting that she became strong specifically to meet his expectations and live up to his training. She hopes that by defeating him, she can make him focus on her instead of the daughters who left him behind, her blades swinging with a desperate power. She continues her assault, but he calmly parries her frantic attacks, reminding her that fighting a human opponent is a completely different challenge than facing a wild beast. He watches her closely, noting how her focus is slipping as her emotions take over. He exploits her opening with a swift movement, catching her off guard and pointing out the flaws in her stance. He warns her that her guard is too loose and her footwork is sloppy, leaving her frustrated and unable to land a hit as he proves that she still has much to learn about the art of the duel. He easily evades her desperate maneuvers as the training session reaches its peak. Ruin attempts a low sweep, hoping to catch him off guard, but he remains immovable. She tries to use her blade as a brace to regain her footing, yet the realization sinks in that she cannot even graze his clothing despite her best efforts. The swordsman brings the struggle to a gentle end, catching her in a firm but kind embrace. He speaks softly, entrusting the safety of the village and its people to her, urging her to stand as their protector against the magical beasts that roam the wilds. After the farewell, he walks alone through the quiet woods, the weight of his decision lingering in the cool air. As the sun dips below the horizon, the first stars begin to shimmer over the peaceful landscape, marking the end of his time in the sanctuary. Later that evening, he sits with the village chief, who speaks of the young girl's hidden sorrow. The elder explains that to a child who lost everything to monsters, he had become more than a mentor. He was a father figure, and she had spent her days pleading with the chief to find any way to make him stay. Despite the weight of these words, he remains resolute, confirming his departure for the following morning. When the chief asks if his heart is truly set on leaving, he can only offer a quiet apology, his gaze fixed on the floor as he grapples with the pain he is causing. The conversation takes a sharp turn when the elder reveals the girl's secret plan to follow him into the unknown. He is visibly startled by the revelation, realizing the complications such a pursuit would bring to both their lives and the safety of the village she is meant to protect. To resolve the matter, the chief instructs him to bring the girl to her the next day, a request he accepts with a somber nod. Outside, the village rests under a bright moon, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding within the chief's home as the hour of his departure draws near. As he steps back into the night air, he is suddenly met by the girl herself, who clings to him in a desperate embrace. He stands frozen, surprised by the sudden intensity of her grip and the raw emotion she is no longer able to hide. She looks up at him, her voice trembling as she questions the necessity of his journey. She begs him to stay, acknowledging the selfishness of her plea, but unable to suppress the overwhelming fear of losing the person who has become her entire world. He looks down at her, his expression softening as he speaks her name. She meets his eyes, her own filled with a mixture of grief and a faint, flickering hope that her words might finally be enough to change his mind. He reached out, extending his sword toward the girl. With a steady voice, he told her that he was entrusting the weapon to her care. As she took the heavy blade into her hands, he explained that it was an heirloom inherited from his own master. He asked if she understood the weight of this gesture, promising that once the purpose of his journey was fulfilled, he would definitely return to her. His thoughts momentarily drifted back a decade, to the time when the other girls had set out on their own paths. They had asked him to come see them again in 10 years, a promise that still weighed heavily on his heart. He envisioned them as they might be now, distinguished, grown, and waiting to welcome him back. Ruin looked on in confusion, wondering who these people were and how he could possibly hold onto such a distant memory. Looking her directly in the eye, he asked if she truly believed he would ever forget a promise made to her, just as he hadn't forgotten the others. She considered his words, imagining herself waiting through the passing years or even decades. She knew that if he ever did forget, she would be there to scold him, but deep down, she realized that forgetting was simply not in his nature. He reaffirmed his commitment, explaining that he had to keep his promise to those who were waiting, just as he expected them to keep theirs. Seeing the moisture in her eyes, he softly asked her not to cry. He leaned in slightly, telling her that he wanted his last memory of her to be her best smile. Farewells, he insisted, should be moments of joy, and he didn't want to carry the image of her crying face on his journey. She wiped her eyes and offered a radiant, determined smile, clutching the sword to her chest. She gave him her word that she would be waiting for his return, no matter how many years might pass. With the promise sealed, he turned and began his long walk away from the village. Behind him, the community gathered to watch his departure, their figures growing smaller as he set his sights on the horizon and the journey ahead. He stands at the edge of a precipice, the vast world stretching out before him. The memory of his promise remains clear. He will see them again, especially Arcana, whose face lingers in his mind as a beacon for his journey. He continues to dwell on the past, wondering how the others have fared in his absence. Images of Nina, Asha, Mia, and Lillian flicker through his thoughts, each a precious connection from a decade ago that he is determined to reclaim. Far from his peaceful reflections, a sense of dread permeates the demon forest. Lillian gazes upon the dark woods, sensing the ominous signs of the Demon King's army beginning its slow, inevitable regeneration within the shadows. She crouches low, her sharp eyes confirming the grim reality of the rumors. Her companions look to her with concern, recognizing the gravity of the situation unfolding before them as the forest itself seems to pulse with malevolence. She's addressed with the respect due to a hero by the knights, who seek her assessment of the battlefield. The reports are dire. The enemy's strength is returning just as the whispers had suggested, threatening the stability of the region. The knights debate their next move, realizing that a standard subjugation request would be futile. The demons are already hunting humans, and sending average adventurers would only lead to more senseless death against such overwhelming odds. She stands amidst her men, grappling with the weight of her responsibility. Despite her status as a hero, the sheer numbers of the enemy make a solo victory impossible, leaving her to wonder if anyone exists who can break through this stalemate. She thinks of a single person as the only one capable of such a feat at that very moment. Alize steps into the shadows of the demon forest, calculating the years since he last set foot in this dangerous territory on his way to the city. He is immediately confronted by a group of lurking monsters. Rather than showing fear, he addresses the creatures with a weary impatience, demanding to know what they want from him, as if they were nothing more than a minor nuisance. He sighs, adjusting his pack as he reflects on his dramatic exit from the village. While he tried to act the part of the cool mentor for his disciple, his true desire is simply to reunite with his precious daughters as quickly as possible. He draws his blade with a fluid, practiced motion, his expression remaining coolly detached despite the looming threat. Addressing the unseen adversaries, he remarks on their audacity, warning that if they intend to obstruct his path, he is more than willing to engage them in a deadly game. He stood his ground as dark, viscous masses bubbled up from the earth, their presence far more menacing than any common creature. Realizing these weren't ordinary slimes, he noted the corrosive liquid they secreted, knowing a single touch could be fatal. Despite the danger, he lunged forward with a desperate strike. His blade met only resistance as the creature's body absorbed the impact, leaving him to curse his luck. The realization that his physical attacks were being neutralized began to sink in. The situation grew even more dire as he watched the slimes dissolve the very stone beneath them. Surrounded by the lethal, bubbling mass, he struggled to find a way out of the tightening circle. With a sharp intake of breath, he braced for the next wave of attacks, his mind racing for a solution as the black ichor lunged toward him. Watching from a safe distance, Liliune and her soldiers observed the struggle, with one man questioning if the warrior in the fray could truly be the legendary Lord Alize. The soldiers began to whisper among themselves, doubting the rumors of his strength and wondering why he hadn't joined the heroes to face the Demon King. Their words turned sharp, even suggesting his absence was a sign of cowardice, which caused Liliune's expression to harden. They continued their critique, arguing that if even a hero like Liliune might find such a foe difficult, there was no way a lone wanderer could prevail. She quickly silenced them, her voice firm as she recalled how he had once protected their entire group and cleared a dungeon single-handedly. Her faith remained unshaken, confident that he would find a way to overcome the impossible. Back in the heat of battle, he dodged another spray of corrosive liquid, his movements fluid despite the overwhelming odds. Though physical combat seemed useless against such foes, he noticed a strange inconsistency in their behavior that gave him a flicker of hope. He observes the surrounding forest, struck by a sudden realization. If the slime's acid is so potent, why aren't the trees melting? He realizes the breakthrough he needs is right in front of him and asks the trees of the demon forest for their strength. He realizes that because the soil of the demon forest is steeped in dense mana, the trees growing there possess a powerful natural magic resistance. Understanding that if these trees can withstand the environment, they won't melt under the slime's touch, he begins a race against time to secure a branch. With a swift, powerful strike, he severs a thick branch from one of the resistant trees. He lands gracefully, exhaling a sigh of relief as he manages to obtain the material just in time. Once he figured that out, the battle shifted in his favor. He uses the heavy branch to smash through the slimes, finding that wiping them out is a cinch now that he has a weapon they cannot dissolve. As he works, he recalls how he used to carve wooden toy for the girls back home, never imagining such a simple skill would prove so vital. He realizes the magic resistance of this would likely neutralize as the acid, meaning a sword fashioned from it can actually kill the creatures. He plunges the makeshift wooden blade into the center of a slime, watching as it dissolves into gross, melted chunks of flesh. He notes that once their core is pierced, they can't hold their form and die, becoming no different from normal slimes. With a confident smirk, he prepares himself for the next wave. He is ready to try his new strategy again, now fully aware of his enemy's weakness. He stands tall, brandishing his new wooden weapon with a playful glint in his eye. He casually asks if they would mind moving out of the way, his confidence restored. Moments later, the forest begins to thin as he makes his way toward the edge of the dense woods. The oppressive atmosphere of the demon forest starts to lift, revealing a vast landscape beyond. Finally emerging from the tree line, he looks out over a sprawling urban center. He has reached his destination, the massive, walled Fortress City Arcana. Fortress City Arcana, a frontline bastion bordering the demon forest, looms ahead as a testament to human resilience. This massive military metropolis has flourished by harnessing the abundant mana flowing from the nearby woods, growing into a dense urban center. He approaches the towering stone walls, reflecting on the fact that it has been 10 long years since he last set foot in a city of this scale. With a friendly wave, he greets the sentries on duty, but his casual approach is met with frozen stares of pure disbelief from the men atop the gate. The atmosphere shifts instantly as the guards level their spears at him, their voices rising in alarm at the sight of someone emerging from the forbidden forest. They bark out orders from the Night Order, stating that no one coming from that direction is permitted entry, leaving him baffled and offended by their hostility. One guard explains that according to every report they have received, no human is supposed to be able to survive the journey back from those depths alive. They even suspect him of being a high-level slime mimicking a human form, a threat the hero had warned them about, despite his frantic protests that he is clearly human. To settle the matter, he produces his adventurer card, pointing out that only a true human could possess such a magical identification. The guard's suspicion turns to absolute shock as they realize the man before them is not just a human, but an elite A-rank adventurer named Alizé. He stands there, blinking in confusion at the title they've just bestowed upon him. Lord Alizé, he repeats, the name feeling heavy and out of place in his own mouth. He finds the moment of stunned silence shattered as the guards suddenly level their spears at him, their expressions hardening into a wall of steel and suspicion. Before he can even attempt to explain, they lunge forward in a coordinated strike, a cloud of dust rising as they tackle him to the ground and shout for his immediate restraint. Moments later, he is bound tightly with thick cords, forced to listen as the guard discuss the sheer audacity of someone trying to impersonate a legendary figure like Lord Alizé. One of the men scoffs at the idea of him being a slime mimic, noting that a monster wouldn't be so easily subdued by mere rope. As they march him through the city streets, the guards continue to mock his supposed A-rank status, laughing at how a true elite would never have been captured so effortlessly. He remains silent, internally noting that he only allowed this to happen to avoid causing a scene or hurting the city's defenders. His attention is suddenly arrested by a towering stone monument in the center of the plaza, a statue of a heroic figure who bears the name of the very man they claim he is impersonating, though he himself seems puzzled by its presence. He feels a sharp, focused look enter his eyes as he catches a glimpse of something unexpected out of the corner of his vision, confirming a suspicion that had been brewing since he entered the gates. Realizing there is no time to lose, he prepares himself, his mind racing with a hunch that demands he break free from this charade immediately. He makes a sudden, effortless movement, causing the ropes binding his wrists to simply fall away, leaving the guards staring in wide-eyed shock as they realize their prisoner was never truly caught at all. He doesn't give them a chance to recover, ducking beneath their clumsy attempts to grab him and surging forward with a speed that leaves the sentries stumbling over their own feet. He tosses the binding ropes back toward the stunned guards, shouting a hasty apology and promising to return for his arrest later. The sentries can only gape in confusion as their prisoner suddenly dictates the terms of his own escape. Sprinting through the city streets, he grits his teeth, praying he isn't too late to intervene. Behind him, the alarm is raised, with guards crying out that a criminal has fled, adding to the chaos of the day. Meanwhile, in a secluded area, Ruin finds herself cornered by a group of unsavory figures, including a grotesque, long-nosed creature who eyes her with predatory intent. He sneers, remarking on how she will make a fine slave, while his companions look on with callous amusement. The group of captors moves through the shadows, confident that their illicit activities have gone unnoticed. The lead thug commends the others for their work, satisfied that no one is following them as they prepare to profit from their captive. The creature looms over the trembling girl, recounting how their trade was nearly destroyed 15 years ago by a single man. He gloats that with that threat long gone, they are finally free to resume their business, ignoring her muffled cries of terror. As the monster reaches for her, Ruin lets out a desperate plea for help, her voice echoing against the cold stone walls. Just as hope seems lost, a figure descends from the heights above, a shadow falling over the scene of the crime. With a thunderous crash that shatters the ground beneath him, the young man interposes himself between the girl and her attackers. His voice booms with righteous fury, demanding to know what they think they are doing as he stares them down. Standing tall with his hand on the hilt of his blade, he shields the weeping girl from the stunned thugs. When they demand to know who this meddling stranger is, he simply declares his name, Alizé. The swordsman approaches the trembling girl, kneeling to meet her eyes. He reassures her that the danger has passed and she is safe now. He suddenly senses movement behind him as the kidnappers prepare to strike. With a burst of speed that leaves them grasping at shadows, he vanishes from their line of sight. Reappearing in the blink of an eye, he delivers a crushing kick that sends one of the thugs flying backward. He warns them sternly that kidnapping children is a crime he will not tolerate. Standing over the groveling man, he looks down with a gaze as cold as steel. He declares his absolute loathing for those who use their power to prey on the weak. His stern demeanor is broken when the girl suddenly lunges forward, wrapping her arms around him in a desperate hug. She sobs with relief, hailing him as the legendary hero she had only heard of in stories. He looks down at her tear-streaked, smiling face and realizes she has mistaken him for a figure of myth. Choosing kindness over correction, he decides not to shatter her illusions and simply accepts the embrace. A large, frantic man soon comes charging into the clearing, shouting for his daughter. Seeing her unharmed, he is overcome with emotion, while the young man watches, his mind drifting back to the children he once protected. The father's gratitude is momentarily eclipsed by confusion as he wonders if the stranger was the one who took her. The swordsman quickly raises his hands, attempting to explain the situation before things escalate. As the sun dips below the horizon and shadows stretch across the town, a sudden, piercing cry of despair echoes through the streets. Inside a nearby home, a magnificent feast has been laid out on the table, though the source of the earlier scream remains a mystery amidst the steaming dishes. Alize sat at the table, listening as the burly man offered a sincere apology for his earlier hostility. The father explained that he hadn't realized the traveler was his daughter's savior and insisted on providing a feast as thanks, despite the young man's modest protests. He accepted the hospitality as the young girl beamed with joy, her father noting that she had refused to eat until she could properly thank the man who rescued her. Bringing his hands together in a silent prayer of thanks, the traveler prepared to begin the meal. Moments later, a realization dawned on him as he pondered the father's words regarding the legendary heroes. He considered how he might use this unexpected connection to his advantage, deeply curious about why these figures were searching for someone sharing his name, a person they revered as a great hero from the past. As the meal concluded, he prepared to depart, thanking the man for the valuable information. The father expressed his own gratitude, hoping that if the traveler truly was acquainted with the heroes, he might use that influence to help his family, while the young man's thoughts drifted to the hope of finally reuniting with the girls he considered his daughters. Before he could step out, the father questioned his destination, prompting a determined look. He replied that he had an important promise to keep, and thanks to the lead he had found here, he felt one step closer to fulfilling it. The burly man poured another drink, his expression turning serious as he asked for confirmation of the traveler's name. He seemed surprised that the young man was unaware of the fame attached to it, explaining that the name belonged to a legendary figure known throughout the land. While his daughter slept soundly nearby, the father explained that the current heroes were distributing flyers in a desperate search for the founder of their order. He showed the traveler one of these papers, which depicted a man revered as the one who defeated the Demon King, though the young man couldn't help but notice that he and the legendary figure shared nothing but name. Suddenly, the man dropped to the floor in a desperate plea, startling his guest. With his head pressed against the wood, he begged the traveler to stay in their home forever, his voice thick with an urgency that hadn't been there moments before. The reason for this sudden outburst became clear as the father spoke of his daughter's happiness and safety. He explained that strange monsters have been appearing near the demon forest, causing local adventurers to lose their livelihoods and putting the entire village, and especially Anna, in grave danger. The traveler looked down at his clenched fist, feeling the weight of the man's desperation. He understood the primal urge to protect one's child all too well, and as the father continued to plead, believing that having a man with the name of a hero among them would ward off danger, he realized the heavy burden that name now carried. He looked down at the man, urging him to stand. The father, desperate and still on his knees, pleaded for him to accept the offer, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. A heavy silence fell between them as he considered the weight of the request. His expression softened, reflecting an internal conflict he couldn't easily resolve despite the man's obvious distress. Thinking of those he left behind, he spoke of his own family, daughters who had grown into women while he was away. The need to reunite with them pulled at his heart, a duty he felt he couldn't ignore for the sake of strangers. Despite this, the father's desperation only intensified. Tears streaming down his face, he wailed a final, impossible plea for him to stay within their home forever, willing to give up anything for the village's safety. He watched the man's display of raw emotion, feeling a pang of pity. When the father claimed this was all for the child's happiness, he sighed, admitting that seeing a grown man reduced to such a state was more than he could bear. The man began to explain the dire situation. Strange slimes were overrunning the demon forest, driving away the local adventurers and leaving the village defenseless. It was this very threat that had nearly claimed Anna's life. Recalling his journey to the village, he mentioned how he had easily dispatched dozens of those creatures on his way. The revelation left the father stunned, his mouth agape at the casual mention of such a feat. He remembered the skepticism at the guild, where the staff warned that only high-ranking adventurers should venture into the forest. When he had produced his A-rank identification, the atmosphere had shifted instantly from doubt to pure shock. As they discussed the hierarchy of their profession, it became clear that reaching A-rank was a feat reserved for those who were practically superhuman. Even young Anna seemed to understand the gravity of his status, her knowledge of the world surprising him. With a bright, innocent smile, she declared that he was far more than just a high-ranking adventurer. To her, he was a legendary hero, a figure of myth whose power transcended any official classification. She watches as Alize prepares to depart, his pack slung over his shoulder. He acknowledges her father's words with a simple nod, confirming his readiness to head off. As he walks away, the father and daughter wave from their porch, calling out for him to return safely from his journey. Meanwhile, at the edge of the demon forest, guards stand watch over the prohibited entrance. They discuss the ongoing slime extermination quest, noting that the hero Lulyun is already deep inside handling the threat. They speak in hushed, respectful tones of her legendary reputation, recalling how she once annihilated an entire Demon King's army, single-handedly. Back at the village, her father continues to observe the distant tree line, noting that reports of slime sightings have been decreasing lately. He muses that the young man's trip might end up being a waste of time, suspecting that he will likely return much earlier than expected. Deep within the woods, the young adventurer searches for the reported threat, but finds only silence. The complete absence of slimes, despite the urgent reports, strikes him as deeply suspicious, and a growing sense of unease begins to take hold as he wonders what is truly happening. The very air in this part of the forest feels heavy and dreadful, clinging to his skin like a physical weight. The gnarled roots and shadows seem to pulse with a hidden, ancient malice. He realizes he cannot simply rely on his initial assumptions about the mission. A grim certainty settles over him. There's an enemy far more dangerous than mere slimes lurking just ahead in the darkness. Elsewhere in the thicket, the hero Lulyun finds herself in a dire predicament. She awakens to find her limbs bound tightly by thick, magical vines, suspended helplessly in a clearing deep within the forest. Her mind races back to how she ended up in this trap. She had been scouting the forest and arrived at a place strangely devoid of slimes. And then, before she could react, everything had gone dark. She tries to break free, but the vines seem to sap her very essence. She realizes with horror that she cannot muster any strength to resist the magical binding, her power drained by the constriction. A mocking voice cuts through her despair as a monstrous figure reveals himself. It is Gagaitas, the third seat of the Demon King's army knights of the Round Table. He laughs at her struggle, boasting of his revival and mocking the incompetence of humans who thought they had finished him. He looms over the captured hero, his voice dripping with malice as he explains that her struggle is futile. The magical vines binding her are not merely restraints. They are parasitic, slowly siphoning away her formidable magic power to fuel his own dark designs. The demon then reveals a more grotesque torment, summoning a swarm of slimes that begin to envelop her lower body. He mocks her desperation, declaring this a spectacle that will never end as the creatures prepare to feast on her remaining energy. He watches with sadistic glee as the slimes crawl higher, their gelatinous forms beginning to dissolve her defenses. Despite her muffled cries of agony, he continues to taunt her, explaining that her magic power is the only thing keeping the slimes from consuming her entirely, for now. She sinks into a dark reflection, her vision obscured by a blindfold as she laments her own perceived weakness. Memories of her childhood surface, reminding her of a time when she was the slowest to develop among her peers, always feeling like the weakest link in their small group. The memory shifts to a warmer moment, focusing on a young man who never left her side despite her struggles. To her, he represented a constant source of strength and kindness, his presence a shield against the insecurities that threatened to overwhelm her. In her mind, she clings to the hope that he is still out there, searching for her even now. She had always believed that no matter how dire the situation, he would appear at the perfect moment to rescue her from the brink of despair. Returning to the grim reality of her captivity, she is faced with a cruel ultimatum: renounce her humanity and join the demon's ranks, or perish. Tears stream down her face as she silently cries out for her savior, her spirit refusing to break even as the slimes tighten their grip. The demon's smirk suddenly falters as he senses a massive, intimidating presence approaching at an impossible speed. Startled by the sheer intensity of the newcomer's power, he frantically orders his slimes to form a defensive barrier around him. He tries to regain his composure, boasting that no human could possibly breach his defenses or reach him in time. Despite his outward confidence, a flicker of uncertainty crosses his face as the air itself seems to vibrate with the force of the oncoming threat. The newcomer strikes with a blinding flash of steel, his blade cutting through the demon's magical barriers as if they were nothing. The sheer force of the impact sends shockwaves through the clearing, signaling the arrival of the one Lulyun had been waiting for. The swordsman exhales a sharp breath, his posture relaxing slightly after the exertion of cleaving through the massive slime barrier. Behind him, the demonic commander stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a mere human could have breached his defenses so easily. Seizing the moment of hesitation, the young warrior lunges forward, his blade a blur of motion as he aims for a decisive strike. The demon barely manages to recoil in time, his eyes widening as he realizes the incredible speed and distance his opponent can cover in a single heartbeat. Having retreated to a safer distance, the winged monster remains shaken, convinced that no ordinary human should be capable of such a feat. Desperate to reclaim control, he gathers a swirling mass of dark energy between his palms and unleashes a devastating blast, screaming for his foe to be erased from existence. He effortlessly evades the dark projectile, closing the gap once more with a cold, focused gaze. He calmly observes that the demon must be the one controlling the slimes, while the creature snarls in frustration, his confidence crumbling as his primary weapons prove useless. Standing tall amidst the remnants of the battle, the swordsman remains an enigma to his adversary. The demon's mind races, trying to reconcile the invincible nature of his creations with the ease with which they were dispatched, wondering what kind of monster he has truly encountered. A sudden thought strikes the demon, leading him to question if the man before him is a descendant of the legendary hero. The warrior, however, is merely confused by the accusation, his thoughts drifting to the simple origin of his blade, which he obtained from the depths of the demon forest. He continues his frantic analysis, noting that while the sword might be crafted from wood of the demon forest, that alone doesn't explain the sheer power behind the strikes. He dismisses the possibility of a royal bloodline, yet the mystery of the man's overwhelming strength remains an agonizing puzzle. He finally grasps the terrifying truth. The human isn't just cutting the slimes, but identifying and destroying their hidden cores in a single precise strike. Without their cores, the creatures have no chance to regenerate, rendering their supposed immortality a moot point. The realization that his opponent can see through every defense to strike at the heart of his power leaves the demon trembling with a mix of fear and fury. He demands to know the true identity of the man who stands before him, a figure who defies all logic of the world he knows. Ignoring the demand, the warrior prepares for his final assault, declaring that his identity is irrelevant since the demon's defeat is already certain. He charges with renewed intensity, while the monster roars in a desperate attempt to assert his own fading dominance. As he keeps the demon occupied, the slimes binding Lilian suddenly vanish, sensing their master's shift into a combat stance. She realizes this is her only chance to escape the tightening vines, and, hearing his voice nearby, feels a surge of hope that he will come to her aid. She continues to strain against her remaining bonds, frustrated by her own perceived helplessness in the face of such a monumental battle. Recalling a lesson from long ago, she tries to steady her breathing and understand the flow of the situation rather than just panicking. The memory of her mentor returns to her, his voice echoing with the wisdom that strength and weakness are two sides of the same coin. He had taught her that the stronger an opponent appears, the more certain it is that they have a hidden opening, and now she searches for that flaw in the demon's overwhelming power. With a desperate cry, she calls out to the young swordsman, her voice cutting through the din of the struggle. He glances back in surprise, his focus momentarily wavering as he sees her still trapped but reaching out for salvation. Gagaitas merely sneers at their bond, claiming that the desire to save or be saved is a pathetic human obsession that creates a fatal opening in their hearts. He declares that they will never defeat a demon as long as they cling to such weaknesses, promising they will both die right where they stand. He then uses Lilian as a shield, threatening to execute her immediately if the swordsman dares to defy him any further. Faced with this cruel ultimatum, the young man hesitates, his grip on his blade loosening as he weighs the life of his companion against the need to strike. Seeing the hesitation, the demon laughs mockingly, convinced that he has already won by exploiting their compassion. He prepares to deliver a finishing blow, confident that his opponent is too paralyzed by fear for Lilian's safety to mount any effective defense. The monster continues his gloating, ordering them not to move a single muscle as he prepares to melt them away with his slimes. Despite the dire situation, the swordsman remains observant, realizing that the demon has finally resorted to the cowardly tricks he expected. However, she notices a shift in the demon's posture, realizing that his absolute sense of superiority has blinded him to his own vulnerability. She understands that his arrogance is the very weakness her mentor spoke of, and she prepares to exploit the opening he has left unguarded. Her intuition is rewarded as a guttural scream of agony suddenly erupts from Gagaitas. Seeing the path she has opened, the swordsman lunges forward with a decisive strike. He delivers a decisive blow, but instead of blood, a viscous, dark fluid erupts from the demon's body. Alizé is stunned as Gagaitas' form begins to liquefy, losing its solid shape. Lilian, her eyes still covered, can only sense the strange shift in the air, questioning if their foe was truly a slime all along. As the remains of the Demon King's general pool onto the ground, Alizé stares down at the dark mass in disbelief. Nearby, Lilian struggles with the revelation. In her previous encounter with him, he had shown no such traits, making this transformation an unexpected and unsettling development. The once mighty warrior has been reduced to a withered, pulsating lump of flesh that behaves more like a primitive organism than a sentient being. It seems his physical vessel has completely collapsed, leaving behind only this grotesque, slime-like residue. Relieved that the immediate threat seems to have passed, Alizé takes a moment to catch his breath, wondering if the battle is truly over. He acknowledges that without Lilian's intervention, he likely would not have survived the encounter, much less forced the demon into this state. He quickly moves toward the tree where Lilian remains bound, his priority shifting to her safety. Seeing her weakened state, he calls out her name, intent on freeing her from the magical vines that hold her captive. Suddenly, The dark puddle on the ground surges with malevolent life, catching Alize completely off guard. A sharp, whip-like appendage of slime lashes out toward him, shattering the brief moment of perceived victory. The creature, now a single-eyed mass of dark sludge, glares at him with pure hatred, cursing the incredible luck that allowed a mere human to survive. It speaks Alize's name with a venomous tone, promising that this encounter will not be forgotten. Despite the warning signs, Alize reaches out to cut the vines binding Lulyun, desperate to get her away from the regenerating threat. She weakly pleads for him to stop, sensing the danger that he is about to walk into. Her voice rises to a frantic scream, commanding him to run as the slime creature prepares a more focused assault. Alize looks back, his eyes widening as he realizes the demon is far from finished. Before he can react, a bolt of dark energy or acidic slime strikes his leg, the impact accompanied by a sickening sizzle. The demon mocks his fleeting moment of hope, leaving Alize reeling in pain as the situation turns dire once again. He sat heavily on the ground, his breath hitching as he clutched his mangled leg. Nearby, the hero remained bound and blindfolded, her voice trembling as she called out his name in desperate concern. He tried to reassure her, though he felt a pang of regret for allowing the demon's core to slip away into the shadows. He dragged himself closer to her, his movements slow and deliberate. She hung her head in shame, her voice cracking as she lamented how pathetic she must look, a hero reduced to a captive in need of rescue by the very man she had hoped to impress. She began to shout, her frustration boiling over as she recounted the promise she had made to herself. When she had first set out on her journey, leaving his side, she had vowed to become strong enough to stand as his equal. Yet here she was, helpless. Tears began to soak through her blindfold as she pleaded with him to simply leave her behind. She insisted that despite her title, she was still the same weak girl she had always been, unworthy of his help or his presence. He didn't speak, merely watching her with a gaze full of quiet compassion. Instead of turning away, he reached out and sliced through the magical vines with a single, fluid motion. He spoke firmly, telling her that she was not weak and that it was only thanks to her presence that he was still alive at all. He gently placed a hand on her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. The gesture was enough to silence her self-doubt, leaving her to look up at him with wide, shimmering eyes as the reality of their reunion finally took hold. The true extent of his sacrifice became clear as the light hit his leg, revealing skin that had been horribly melted and charred by the demon's acidic touch. He dismissed the injury as a small price for her safety, but the pain eventually proved too much, causing him to stumble as he tried to stand. Realizing that neither of them was in any condition to trek through the dense forest, he let out a sharp whistle. In response, a massive, silver-furred wolf, named Kamiya, bounded from the undergrowth, ready to carry them back to safety. They fell into a long, silent embrace, the years of separation and the trauma of the recent battle melting away. In that moment, the titles of hero and adventurer mattered little compared to the bond they shared. As they prepared to depart, she fashioned a crude set of clothes from bundles of grass and large leaves to replace her ruined armor. He watched her with a wide, goofy grin, his heart full of pride at seeing how much his daughter had grown, even if his expression earned him a look of mild annoyance. He stands calmly as the massive wolf, Kamiya, looms over them, responding to the call. Lulyun is struck with disbelief, her voice trembling as she recognizes the creature as the legendary guardian deity of the forest. She can hardly process that her companion is on such familiar terms with a being of such mythic stature. The great beast speaks with a surprisingly pragmatic tone, acknowledging that he will fulfill his duty since he has already been compensated. He notes that Alize's master is quite generous, having already provided an advance payment in the form of loose change left at the forest entrance. Accepting the terms, the swordsman simply requests that the wolf carry them back to the safety of the town. This revelation leaves the hero feeling a bit disillusioned, finding it somewhat childish that a legendary spirit would be so motivated by coin. As they prepare to depart, her thoughts shift to the mystery of his past, and she finally asks where he has been hiding during all the years he was missing. He explains that for the last decade, he served as a sword instructor in a small village nestled deep within the demon forest. Hearing this, she informs him that everyone back home, especially the young girls like Nina and Arcana, have never stopped searching for him and are eagerly awaiting his return. A soft smile touches his face, relieved to hear that those he cared for are thriving in his absence. Despite the warm news, a shadow of doubt lingers in his mind as he reflects on the battle they just endured. He worries that allowing the demon's core to escape was a grave mistake, sensing that the creature is already plotting its next move. Every passing second feels heavy with the threat of what might happen if the demon's plans in the forest come to fruition. She, however, is focused on the future, her heart filled with the modest hope of creating new memories alongside him. A gentle, genuine smile graces her features as she looks forward to the days ahead, unaware of the darkness still lurking nearby. But the path ahead is far from certain, and a chilling premonition suggests that this newfound peace is fragile. The weight of destiny looms over them, hinting that they are destined to be betrayed in the most devastating way possible. Far below, the mangled remains of the demon's core crawl through the undergrowth, fueled by a singular, burning hatred. It vows that it will not let its prey escape, fixating on the swordsman as the one person it will personally destroy with its own hands. Inside the city of Arcana, the grand hallway of the Lord's mansion stands silent and imposing, a testament to the power held within. Within these walls, a woman's desperate pleas echo as she collapses to the floor, clutching an arm consumed by a dark, spreading blight that seems to be eating away at her very being. She kneels in submission, her voice trembling as she addresses the shadow of Gagaitas that looms over her from the window's sill, its presence cold and unforgiving. The dark entity mocks her, noting the passage of time since they last met and acknowledging her current status as the city's ruler with a cruel, knowing tone. She can only listen in terror as the creature continues its cruel assessment, her body trembling under the weight of its gaze. A sharp pang of agony shoots through her as the curse pulses. The creature reminds her that this curse of petrification was his gift to her 2 years prior, a mark of her eternal debt. With tears in her eyes, she demands to know what more he could possibly want after taking so much from her already, her spirit nearly broken. Ignoring her suffering, the shadow demands her absolute cooperation, its voice a low hiss that promises further pain if she dares to refuse. It commands her to procure a human to serve as bait, and broken by the pain and the threat, she has no choice but to bow her head and obey. Far from this darkness, a memory of a brighter time surfaces, where young Lilian greets Alize with a radiant smile, unaware of the shadows that would eventually loom over them. She had always been physically frail as a child, often appearing as though she might collapse at any moment. Alize remembers her as someone who aspired to be a magic researcher, yet now she wields her sword with a strange, relentless intensity. He finds himself questioning if the powerful figure he encountered is truly the same girl from his memories. Because of her sudden, bashful inquiry about her own popularity, he is left momentarily speechless. She looks at him with a soft, expectant expression, her thoughts suggesting that she perhaps should have shared her feelings with him much sooner. Moments later, the weight of this realization causes him to sink into a state of distress, burying his face in his hands. He berates himself for failing to recognize that she has grown into a young woman with her own complex heart, repeating the same frantic questions to himself in the silence of the room. As they sit together at the table, the conversation turns toward the dark events in the Forest of Magic. He listens as she recounts her encounter with the demon Gagaitas, a name that brings a flicker of relief to her now that the truth is finally being shared. In response to his confusion, she clarifies that the slime creature they recently faced was not the true Gagaitas she once knew. She explains that while she had defeated a physical form of the demon in the past, the current threat possesses a different, more unsettling nature. She continues by proposing a chilling theory. The slimes inhabiting the forest may actually be eggs of the demon race. The mere thought of a demonic resurrection fills her with dread, and she looks to him for support, admitting that her mind has already begun to imagine the most terrible outcomes. Because these eggs are designed to absorb blood and flesh to store magical energy, she describes them as a horrifyingly efficient means of rebirth. He begins to see the logic in her words, realizing that if her hypothesis is correct, it explains the unnatural behavior of the creatures they have encountered. The possibility that an entire army of demon lords could be returning to life leaves him completely stunned. He realizes that if Gagaitas is being revived, others may follow, turning a simple visit to see his daughters into a struggle against a rising tide of evil that he never expected to face again. Suddenly, the heavy atmosphere is shattered as Anna's father bursts into the room, gasping for air and visibly shaken. He ignores Alize's attempt to apologize for his absence, his eyes wide with a terror that suggests something far worse than a simple misunderstanding has occurred. He collapses forward into his friend's arms, his strength entirely spent as he begs for assistance. With a trembling voice and tears in his eyes, he pleads for Alize to help him, his desperation palpable as he clings to the only person he believes can save his daughter from the encroaching darkness. He remains on his knees, his voice trembling as he begs for intervention. Alize looks down at the broken man, his brow furrowed with growing concern as he asks what could have possibly happened to young Anna. The desperate father reaches out, pleading to be taken to his daughter immediately. Sensing the urgency, Alize turns to Lilian, promising to explain the situation later as they prepare to move out at once. Upon reaching the bedside, Alize recoils in shock at the sight before him. He can hardly believe his eyes, muttering a breathless question about the nature of the affliction ravaging the girl's body. Anna lies motionless, her arm transformed into a gnarled, bark-like substance that creeps up her shoulder. Alize recognizes the dreaded greenification curse, a mysterious ailment where the skin hardens like wood, which has been appearing more frequently in recent years. Lilian observes the rapid progression of the curse with a grim expression, noting that it is spreading far faster than any known records suggest. Their grim analysis is suddenly interrupted by the heavy, rhythmic thud of armored boots approaching the room. A squad of city guards bursts through the doorway, their spears leveled in a threatening display of force. The sudden intrusion catches Alize and his companions off guard, forcing them to face the unexpected military presence. From behind the line of soldiers, the sharp click of heels echoes against the floorboards. Lil Yun's eyes widen in recognition as a composed voice rings out, stating that their arrival was precisely what had been anticipated. The newcomer steps forward, revealing herself as a woman of high standing with long, flowing hair and an air of absolute authority. She addresses Alize directly, identifying him as the hero who vanquished the slimes and crippled the demon Gagaitas, a figure legendary within the city's walls. She continues her assessment, noting with a hint of amusement that he appears quite different in person than the depictions on the local flyers. Alize remains silent, his gaze wary as he tries to discern the intentions of this powerful noblewoman. He finally demands to know her identity, prompting Lil Yun to formally introduce the woman as Rhea Arcana, the Margrave of the region. Alize stares at the ruler, realizing that their quest for answers has just become significantly more complicated. She stands with a regal yet burdened air, identified as the Margrave of Arcana, Rhea, who has brought immense wealth and development to the city in just a few years despite her youth. Facing her, the young adventurer demands to know what she means by being sent by Gagaitas, questioning if she truly intends to serve as a vassal to such a demon. She calmly responds that she was indeed ordered by Gagaitas to find him, expressing a hollow sense of honor at finally meeting the legendary figure. This admission sends a shock through the hero, who cannot fathom a human willingly becoming a subordinate to the demon race. Rhea simply confirms the grim reality, admitting her status as his servant with a downcast gaze. While she stands in silence, the young man finds the notion utterly impossible, his mind racing to reconcile the image of a noble leader with that of a demon's puppet. The physical toll of her service is laid bare, revealing the curse's progression from her left shoulder to her neck, as well as across her left leg and right arm, where the wood-like transformation is particularly severe. Watching her closely, he realizes that if his suspicions are correct, there must be a reason why she remains so subservient to Gagaitas' whims despite the obvious suffering. The hero suddenly shifts her focus, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she asks if anyone else can hear a faint, wet sound like the movement of a slime. While she remains alert, the group stands in tense silence. The girl's father and the young adventurer both realize that Gagaitas might be using magical surveillance to watch them. She closes her eyes, concentrating all her senses on the subtle vibrations of the air to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. Knowing her ears are far more sensitive than any normal humans, he remains silent, confident that if there is a hidden observer, she will be the one to find it. She completes her sweep of the room, reporting to the others that no magical slimes are lurking nearby. While she stands guard, he turns his focus back to the Margrave, stating firmly that she is clearly being coerced by Gagaitas and that the lies must stop. He continues, explaining that his experience as a warrior allows him to see the unnatural tension in her body, a clear sign of the petrification curse. The warrior's words cause her to react with a sharp, defensive glare, questioning why the fact that she was threatened should change anything. This defiance sparks a heated outburst from the hero, who shouts that being a victim is no excuse for her actions. Crushed by the weight of her guilt, the noblewoman collapses, admitting she watched as her people were given to the demons. Her confession grows darker as she reveals that she even sacrificed a young girl to Gagaitas this very day, calling herself a wretched coward for surviving. She insists that she is now nothing more than a tainted servant of the demon race, both in body and soul. Despite her despair, he refuses to accept her self-condemnation, reminding her of the many times she actually fought to protect the city's inhabitants. He looks down at the dark, scaly curse on her arm, realizing the immense toll her secret resistance has taken on her. With unwavering determination, he promises to kill Gagaitas and restore her freedom, ignoring her desperate claims that such a feat is impossible. He looks at her with unwavering resolve, his voice steady as he promises to take on the burden of her salvation. She can only look down, her eyes clouded with the belief that it is far too late for someone like her to be rescued, her spirit broken by the weight of her past choices. Pressing for the truth, he asks her to be honest about her situation and why she is here. He needs to know if she is truly acting as a willing pawn for the demon Gagaitas, or if there is a deeper, more tragic reason for her forced servitude to such a monster. She remains silent for a moment, the shadow of her guilt hanging heavy over her features. Finally, she admits the painful reality. She has indeed been serving as Gagaitas' subordinate, a confession that seems to drain the last of her strength as she admits her role in the demon's schemes. Memories of a desperate plea flash through her mind, recalling a time when she screamed for help amidst chaos. In those dark moments, Anna and her father were caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered by the very forces she now serves, a cycle of tragedy she feels unable to escape. The heavy silence is shattered as the wall of the chamber explodes inward. The hero, Lil Yun, bursts through the debris with her sword drawn, her arrival a sudden storm of steel and intent. He quickly moves to shield the Margrave from the flying stone, checking if she is unharmed. She finds herself face to face with a nightmare, a small figure whose arm has been transformed into a gnarled, wooden limb. The creature's face is a twisted mockery of the young girl, Anna, its skin cracking and peeling away to reveal something inhuman and petrified beneath. Horrified by the transformation, Anna's father can barely find his voice, stuttering in disbelief at the sight of his daughter. The creature, however, shows no recognition, its voice raspy as it declares that it will never forgive those who betray Lord Gagaitas, its loyalty now bound to the demon. Sensing a pulse that is far from human, the hero demands to know what this thing truly is. The creature only responds with a chilling, wide-eyed grin, its face half consumed by the petrifying curse that has claimed its soul and replaced its innocence with a predatory malice. Before anyone can react, the mutated girl hurls herself through the shattered window, escaping into the night with unnatural agility. The hero lunges forward to give chase, while he watches from the room, stunned by the sheer speed and malice of the creature that was once a child. Her pursuit is cut short as she encounters a massive, grotesque plant with a maw full of jagged teeth. The realization dawns on her that the curse is not just transforming people, but the very environment itself into a predatory trap, as the plant seems to have consumed something already. She watched in horror as the creature revealed itself to be Anna, her body grotesquely transformed. The girl hung upside down, her face split between her original innocent features and a stony, demonic mask. She introduced herself as Labisathkas, a demon born from the power of Lord Gagaitas. Alize stood frozen, demanding to know who, or what, she truly was. The girl's transformation sent a shock through the hero, who realized that Gagaitas was capable of creating demons other than the slimes they had previously encountered. This new revelation added a terrifying layer to the threat they faced, as the corruption seemed to be evolving into something far more personal and sentient. She could only look on as the mutated child began to mock Alize's lack of a violent reaction. The creature had expected him to be consumed by rage at the sight of her current form, especially since he was so familiar with how she used to look. Her voice carried a chilling, distorted cheerfulness that contrasted sharply with her horrific appearance. As she spoke, the massive plant structure behind her groaned and shifted, its thick vines tightening around her small frame. The young man watched with a grim expression, his eyes never leaving the girl as he questioned what her true objective was in appearing before them like this. The young man's hand tightened into a white-knuckled fist as she leaned in closer, her tone turning venomous. She laid the blame for her transformation squarely on his shoulders, claiming that everything, her suffering and her service to Gagaitas, was the direct result of his defiance against the Demon King's power. She only offered a mocking, lopsided smile in response to his demand to know where Gagaitas was hiding. Her single visible eye glinted with a cruel amusement as she prepared to deliver her final message, seemingly enjoying the psychological weight she was placing on him. The swordsman's eyes narrowed as she pointed a small, pale finger toward the distance, announcing that she carried a message from Lord Gagaitas himself for the traitor. Lilyun and Alize stood their ground, watching the small figure as she prepared to reveal their enemy's next move. She delivered the final, chilling message. Gagaitas was waiting at the Lake of Lamentation, far to the east of the Demon Forest entrance. With a final promise to kill Alize, the girl's presence loomed over him, leaving the group with a clear, albeit dangerous, path forward. The atmosphere in the room shifts abruptly as the floor begins to tremble. Alize looks down, his senses heightened, realizing that the mundane meeting has just taken a deadly turn. Across from him, the young girl Anna stands transformed, a dark, scaly corruption creeping across her face and a massive, inhuman claw sprouting from her side. He reacts instantly, his voice cutting through the sudden tension as he warns Rhea to move back. The corrupted girl lunges, her movements unnaturally fast, as she declares her intent to offer them up as a sacrifice to Gagaitas. The swordsman throws himself in front of Rhea, shielding her with his body just as the floorboards beneath them are obliterated by a violent upward thrust. She cries out his name, her voice trembling with fear as the wood splinters around them. He grits his teeth, cursing the girl's cunning for hiding her right hand and attacking through the floor. She looks back with a cold, detached expression, deciding that since her initial surprise failed, she will simply finish them off here. Seeing the scale of the destruction, he barks orders at the guards and Anna's father, telling them to take Rhea and escape while they still can. The room continues to disintegrate, torn apart by the sheer force of the demonic appendages erupting from the girl's small frame. The warrior remains steadfast even as the building crumbles around him. He faces the monstrous entity, who mocks his decision to stay, questioning why he hasn't joined the others in their flight. She briefly adopts a piteous tone, feigning pain and calling out to him, but the mask slips almost immediately. A wide, predatory grin stretches across her face as she watches him, her eyes gleaming with malice. He stands his ground, his blade held ready, refusing to be swayed by her psychological games. He lashes out with a swift strike against the massive, stony limb, but the blow seems to do little more than provoke her laughter. She taunts him, claiming his efforts are pathetic and that he is far too weak to stop her. The young man remains unruffled by her insults, his gaze fixed on her as she boasts about her inevitable victory. She insists that in this form, he has no hope of landing a decisive blow, her confidence bordering on arrogance. He finally speaks, his voice calm and analytical as he points out a flaw in her taunts. He notes that she has referred to this form twice now, leading him to question whether she is merely a parasite inhabiting Anna's body or if this transformation is something else entirely. He pressed the advantage, demanding to know the whereabouts of the true Anna now that the monster's facade had been stripped away. The creature, its face a distorted mask of human skin and dark void, recoiled in genuine shock, unable to comprehend how its perfect imitation had been seen through with such minimal information. He chuckled softly, resting his blade casually against the shoulder as he watched the monster's confusion. With a calm confidence, he informed the entity that she had been the one to reveal the truth through her own careless words. The memory of her verbal slip-up flashed through her mind as he pointed out the flaw in her acting. He noted that children are poor liars, especially when they use terms of address that don't match the person they are speaking to. By calling him old man, when the real Anna's father was far more rugged, she had exposed her ignorance of the girl's life. The realization that her disguise was undone by a single word left the monster trembling with rage and fear. Suddenly, a gust of magical energy swirled through the room as Lillian unleashed a binding spell. Chains of wind manifested instantly, wrapping tightly around the monster's limbs and pinning her to the floor. Rhea watched in awe, recognizing the sheer skill required to manifest such a complex technique so rapidly. She explained that her combat style relied on instant magic, a seamless integration of sword forms and elemental spells that allowed for immediate execution without long incantations. As the monster struggled against the wind, screaming insults and threats, Alize looked on with a grim smile, acknowledging that the hero's strength far surpassed his own. The hero demanded answers, looming over the restrained creature with her blade drawn. When the monster stubbornly refused to speak, Alize stepped forward to calm his companion, noting that the entity's silence was proof enough that she knew exactly where the real Anna was being held. He suggested they take a more measured approach, sensing the monster's growing panic. He reasoned that since they had her trapped, they had the luxury of time to extract the information they needed to save the girl. The creature's mind raced with terror, not of her captors, but of the failures she represented. She realized with a sinking dread that because of her incompetence, the grand plans of Lord Gagaitas were being jeopardized, and the consequences of such a failure would be far worse than death. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady as he addressed her by the name she had used earlier, Labasafkas. He commanded her to stand and face them, but the monster was beyond reason, consumed by the fear of being abandoned by her demonic master. A brilliant light suddenly erupted from beneath the monster as a complex magic circle flared to life on the floor. Screaming that she would sacrifice herself to be of use to Gagaitas, she began to channel a massive amount of energy. Lillian's eyes widened in alarm, and she shouted for Alize to get away as the room began to tremble under the weight of the impending explosion. He is suddenly engulfed by a surge of overwhelming power as a massive, spectral hand manifests from the magic circle, clutching at the very air around him. Seeing the danger, he bellows for Lillian to stay back, fearing she will be caught in the impending blast. She, however, realizes with horror that this isn't a simple explosion, but a high-level teleportation spell designed to whisk him away to an unknown location. A blinding pillar of light erupts, consuming the area and leaving the hero behind to cry out his name into the empty air as he vanishes from her sight. Moments later, he finds himself tumbling through the air before crashing into the soft earth of a dense forest. Disoriented, he pushes himself up, wondering if he's been sent back to the same woods where his journey began. As he explores his new surroundings, he reaches the shore of a serene body of water, where a sign identifies it as the Lake of Lamentation. The realization of his location brings a grim look to his face, knowing he is far from safety. He looks down at the dagger in his hand, a weapon belonging to Lillian, and realizes the monster's true intent was to isolate him. Nearby, the creature in Anna's form mocks him, laughing about how much easier it will be to finish him off now that he is alone. Suddenly, the air grows heavy as a familiar, malevolent presence manifests. Gagaitas stands before them, holding a trembling Rhea captive as he looms over the scene. The sight of the demon lord sends a jolt of shock through him, his eyes widening as he realizes the scale of the trap he has fallen into and the danger Rhea is in. The demon remains composed, explaining that he has already managed to restore half of his physical form. He reveals that the Lake of Lamentation is not just a landmark, but a vital source of magical energy for his recovery. Desperate to regain favor, the monster begs her master to listen, claiming she successfully delivered the target as ordered. Hidden behind a tree, he can only grit his teeth in frustration, realizing he is now deep within enemy territory. He watched from the shadows as the girl, her face marred by a dark, pulsating growth, looked up at her master with a desperate, seeking smile, asking if her actions were worthy of praise. He met her gaze with nothing but cold indifference, demanding to know what she thought she was accomplishing with her reckless behavior. He continued his interrogation, reminding her that his orders were simple: deliver a message. Instead, she had squandered precious resources to teleport herself directly to this location. a move he had never authorized. His voice grew harsher as he pointed out the sheer cost of such magic, noting that the mana she had burned through was a gift from him, not something to be wasted on a whim. She tried to stammer out an apology, but he cut her off, uninterested in her regrets. The hidden observer watched the fracturing alliance from behind the trees, noting the girl's heavy breathing and the clear signs of exhaustion and fear etched into her remaining visible features. The demon's frustration boiled over as he explained the strategic cost of her blunder. By arriving so early, she had inadvertently drawn the enemy to the lake before his own recovery was complete, rendering her efforts worse than useless. She pleaded with him, her voice cracking as she insisted that her only desire was to be of service to him, but her words seemed only to further provoke his ire. He decided then that she was no longer of any use, striking her with a brutal, backhanded blow that sent her tumbling across the rocky ground, coughing up dark fluid as he coldly commanded her to die. The monster loomed over her broken form, preparing to deliver a final, lethal strike to the defective product that had failed his expectations. In her terror, she looked toward the woods, her eyes silently begging for a salvation she didn't expect to find. He could no longer remain a silent witness to such cruelty. Leaping from the shadows to interpose himself between the predator and its prey, his blade clashing against the demon's clawed hand. The demon recoiled in genuine shock, questioning why a hero would risk his life to save an enemy who had sought his destruction.